Fantastic. Awesome. So I am going to be talking about mosquito control in your community. And really what I'm going to talk a lot about is steps you can take at home to try and reduce mosquito bites. But before I get there, I really wanted to start with some background information on mosquitoes so that to kind of lay the groundwork of why do we need mosquito control, So just starting with some background information on their life cycle. Mosquitoes do have a life cycle that contains four stages: the egg, larva, pupa, and adult. All mosquitoes' eggs need water to hatch, and then the larval stage and the pupal stage are completely aquatic stages of the life cycle. And it's the eggs can be laid one by one, or they can be laid in a raft. And depending on the species, they may hatch from the egg 24 to 36 hours after they're laid, or some eggs can actually stay and remain viable in the soil for months until their water comes through and hatches them. So some eggs are actually desiccation resistant. So as I mentioned, the larval stage is aquatic, and that can last. It's very temperature dependent how long that stage can last, but usually it's going to be about 5 to 14 days. The pupal stage is also aquatic. This is a non-feeding but active stage, and this is really where the formation of the adult structures happen. And then the adult stage, this is what we're most familiar with, likely the terrestrial phase. There's images of what both a male and male and female mosquito look like. So they're only going to have one set of wings, and the females, they only need to mate once, and usually the adults are going to live about 2 to 4 weeks. Again, it's going to depend on the environment. The humidity and temperature can affect how long they live. And generally, the female mosquitoes are going to live longer than the males. So there is a lot of diversity when it comes to mosquitoes worldwide. There's actually over 3,500 species. And here in Florida, we actually have perfect conditions to really allow a lot of mosquitoes to be here in our state, because mosquitoes, they can't maintain a constant core temperature. So really, because we have not only subtropical and tropical climate, we have different climates that allow so many mosquito species to kind of like find their perfect area and be successful. So if you've ever wondered why we have so many mosquitoes in Florida, it's because we are hot and humid, and that's what mosquitoes love. So there's really three main categories of aquatic habitats that mosquitoes utilize for development, for laying their eggs, and then also development of the aquatic stages. So these are the floodwater, permanent water, and container habitats. The floodwater habitats are temporary. They can change quickly depending on weather conditions. And usually once the habitats are inundated with water and the eggs are flooded, they're going to hatch. Examples of floodwater habitats include marshes, mudflats, low-lying areas of pastures and fields. And then the permanent water habitats, they're going to remain wet most of the time. And examples of these This habitat include ponds, swamps, and brackish marshes. But container habitats, I think we don't always associate mosquitoes with this type of habitat, but I think this is a habitat that we really can have a lot of control over the development of mosquitoes in this type of habitat. So I always like to make sure that I point out the container habitat is can be very important for some species of mosquitoes. And the container habitat, it can include natural or man-made containers. So natural containers, examples are going to be tree holes, bromeliads. For the man-made containers, that can be any containers around your house. So like a rain barrel, bottles, tires, buckets, and more. And I mentioned there's over 3,500 species worldwide. Here in Florida, we have over 90 or approximately 90 species. So just to give you an idea, we have a lot. And I love this image here because I think it does a great job illustrating the diversity of mosquitoes. So you can see there's this large mosquito. It's the largest mosquito in our state. It's Toxorhynchides rudolus, also known as the elephant mosquito. And then we also have in the same photo Aedes albopictus, which is also a common name is the Asian tiger mosquito. It's a medium-sized mosquito, and it's one that you might or likely have been bit by. It likes to develop in containers. So I just love that picture because it illustrates the diversity of mosquito species in our state. So just to kind of give you a little bit more background information on mosquitoes, it's only going to be it's only the females that take the blood meals, and males only feed on nectar. And so both males and females will feed on nectar, but it's only the females that take the blood meals. And that's because they need to finish developing their eggs. That's why mosquitoes bite, is to help the females need to finish developing their eggs. Interestingly, though, not all female mosquitoes take blood meals. So I showed you a picture of an elephant mosquito on the previous slide. Here's another picture of one. And what's interesting about the elephant mosquito is that they're big. So as larvae, when they're immature, they actually will feed on smaller mosquito larvae. And so they actually are able to build up enough protein during that larval stage that they don't need to obtain any additional protein when they're adults to finish developing their eggs. So there is an exception to the rule that all females, not all females do blood feed. There are a few species that don't. And just to kind of let you know that there is variation, a lot of variation, of course, due to the different species. The time of day can vary when they take blood meals based on what species they are, and the type of host that they like to take blood meals from can also vary. So there's actually species that takes blood meals from earthworms. So that's, I think, pretty interesting. There's some that like to specialize just on birds and reptiles, some on mammals, and then some on humans. And those are the ones that, we certainly care about because they do take meals from us, and it's actually during that process of the female mosquito taking blood meals that we can actually get infected with a pathogen such as a virus. So this slide is just illustrating how that process happens. So a female, she comes, bites you, takes some blood from you, and let's say that you happen to be infected with a mosquito-borne virus such as dengue, then that mosquito is actually going to pick up that virus in the blood. When she's taking the blood meal from you, it's going to, the infected blood is going to travel to her midgut, and then it's going to enter her circulatory system and travel throughout the entire mosquito and infect all of the tissue throughout the body of the mosquito, including her salivary glands. So once her salivary glands are infected, every time she takes a blood meal from then on out, she's going to release these virions, infective virus particles, in her saliva. So that's really how mosquitoes get infected and how pathogens such as viruses are transmitted by them. So I do want to talk about the mosquito-borne diseases in Florida to make you aware of what is out there. We have two different classifications of mosquito-borne diseases: endemic and exotic. So endemic means that there's transmission year-round of these of that type of virus. And if there's not an outbreak of something happening in a human, or there's not a human outbreak, there's still transmission happening, generally in an animal mosquito reservoir type system. Whereas with an exotic mosquito-borne virus or disease, that there's not going to be year-round transmission ever that's taking place. What can happen is we share mosquito species that can transmit pathogens with areas that also have the same mosquitoes and the same pathogens. And so basically what happens is the pathogens, somebody gets sick, travels abroad, where there's transmission of, say, dengue virus. That person gets sick abroad, they come visit, for example, here in Florida, and we share the same mosquito species. So local mosquitoes bite that person, and then they get infected and transmit it. But there's only going to be a localized outbreak. Once all those mosquitoes die that were infected, that's going to be the end of the outbreak, and it's going to take another person getting sick and bringing that virus over to start any type of additional outbreaks, any additional human cases. So I just wanted to quickly tell you about the endemic and exotic mosquito-borne diseases we have in our state. So we have St. Louis encephalitis virus, Eastern equine encephalitis virus, and West Nile virus. I'm going to spend more time talking about West Nile and dengue just because they're the most common mosquito-borne diseases in our state. So for example, St. Louis encephalitis, there haven't been any human cases since 2014. Eastern equine encephalitis virus, it is rare. There is only 3 cases in our state in 2018 and 2 in 2023. I bring this up because even though it's rare, the symptoms are severe, so it's just good to know about. But when it comes to West Nile, that's going to be our endemic mosquito-borne disease where we have the most cases annually within our state. And so there's usually about 22 human cases every year. And then we can have periodic outbreaks where there's more cases. For example, in 2020, we had an outbreak where there was 85 cases, and that was primarily in Miami-Dade County. So for our exotic mosquito-borne diseases in our state, it's going to be chikungunya, Zika, and malaria, and dengue. But we haven't had any local Zika since 2017 and no chikungunya since 2014. Malaria is rare, but you may have heard that there were 7 cases in 2023. And then when it comes to dengue, there's usually about 34 cases every year. and that number has been increasing in recent years. And again, there can be periodic outbreaks when there's more cases. For example, in 2024, there were 85 local cases. So you may be wondering, well, what's going on this year in terms of like human cases? Uh, so there's been 0 cases of St. Louis encephalitis virus, Eastern equine encephalitis virus, and malaria. There have been 5 people that have you may not know this, but every time someone donates blood, their blood is actually screened for different pathogens or antibodies to pathogens. And one of those is they're being screened for antibodies to West Nile. So there's actually been 5 people that blood donors that have tested positive for West Nile in this year. And the cases are start in Escambia County in the Panhandle and go all the way down to Miami-Dade County. So just kind of being aware that transmission is occurring statewide. It's good to be aware of that. And then for dengue, we've had 10 cases this year. So all in all, so far we've had when you compare the expected number of cases that have come from an average from previous years, we've actually had we're having a lower than normal human cases. So that's great. That's good news. But just be aware that there's always the chance of mosquito-borne diseases. So it's good to be prepared and to take these steps that we're going to talk about to try and prevent those mosquito-borne illnesses. I did want to talk a little bit more about West Nile and dengue virus. As I mentioned, West Nile, actually, I don't think I've brought this up yet, but West Nile is considered the most important mosquito-borne disease endemic in the U.S. And the reason it's considered endemic is because it's actually always in the environment, circulating between birds and mosquitoes. It's the birds that are actually the reservoirs for West Nile virus. And when we get infected, or when horses get infected, or other mammals, the reason that happens is because certain species of mosquitoes, they aren't picky when it comes to what they blood feed on. And so certain mosquitoes, they're going to be responsible for just taking blood meals from birds and circulating that pathogen just between birds. But some might be less picky. And so they might feed on a bird that's infected, then they get infected and then transmit it to us. We're considered dead-end host in that transmission cycle because even though we get infected, we never have high enough virus titer within our blood that when another mosquito takes a blood meal from us, they're never going to get infected. So from the point of view of the virus transmission cycle, we're considered dead-end host. So that's that transmission cycle and why that's considered an endemic virus in our state. So generally, the symptoms for West Nile are going to appear 2 to 14 days after you've been bitten by an infected mosquito. The majority of the people that get infected aren't going to show symptoms, but the reason it's important to be aware of this is because the 20% that the 20% can show symptoms that may be mild, but there's 1% or less than 1% that are going to have more serious, severe symptoms associated with the central nervous system. So it's just good to be aware of this, the symptoms and possibilities. So the vectors in our state, mosquito vectors in our state are Culex mosquitoes, There's one species that's primarily associated with urban and suburban habitats, Culex quinquefasciatus, and one species that's associated with more rural areas, Culex nigripalpus. But one thing I just want to point out is their larvae, their immature mosquitoes of these species, they can develop in a variety of different water-filled bodies. But I just want to point out one of these types of containers, or one of the type of habitats they can develop in, is containers. So I'm going to keep coming back to that because I feel like that's something, like I said, we can control, is reducing containers and these viruses. Some of these mosquitoes can transmit viruses. I also briefly just wanted to talk about dengue virus. This is the most important mosquito-borne virus affecting humans worldwide. So it has a worldwide distribution, and it causes dengue and severe dengue. There's 50 to 400 million cases a year, and potentially up to 22,000 deaths, and that's worldwide. This is only going to be transmitted between humans. Humans are going to be the reservoir for the virus, and it's only can be transmitted through an infected mosquito, or it can be transmitted through blood transfusions, things of that nature. Similar to West Nile, only 25% of dengue infections are going to display symptoms, and this can also be, you may have heard it called breakbone fever because of the muscle and joint pain associated with it. 5% of dengue fever cases can develop into severe dengue, and the chances of that happening is increased by potentially being infected by a different or by multiple strains of the virus over time. So this is just showing some of the symptoms of mild versus severe dengue. Obviously, the severe symptoms are going to be a lot worse and can include shock, severe vomiting, and severe bleeding. So certainly not something you want to contract. So in terms of our dengue virus vectors, we have urban, suburban container mosquitoes, which are Aedes aegypti, the common name is yellow fever mosquito, and Aedes albopictus. I do want to point out that in the US, Aedes aegypti is the species that has been responsible for US transmission. We've never had any cases transmitted by the Aedes albopictus, the Asian tiger mosquito, but in other parts of the world, it has been able to transmit the virus. So it's just good to be aware of it as well. And Aedes aegypti is only present in the peninsular portion of Florida. It's not present in the panhandle. And so these mosquitoes, they don't like ponds, lakes. That is not where you're ever going to find them. Where you're going to find them are only in natural and man-made containers. So you know, this is the type of mosquito species that really is reliant on humans. They like to utilize the containers we leave around that fill with water for their immature development, and they also love to take blood meals from us. And so they've really grown to live in close association with us. So I just want to show you a short video about this, about Aedes aegypti. We have to watch a quick ad.
Sparkle is here to save the day and save you money.
Now we're skipping it.
See, it's
Hopefully.
just right for
Why aren't you letting me skip?
Everyday messes.
I
That's great.
don't know why it's not letting me skip this darn ad.
Day saved,
Go away.
money.
Okay. I seem to be having some technical difficulties, so I'm gonna give up with showing the video. I apologize, but I will put the video in the link so that you can look at
No hunting for Wi-Fi.
watch it on your own time. I apologize for that. I don't know why it wasn't allowing me to skip that ad, but I'll make sure I share the link to it in the chat so you can watch it. So we've talked about everything. I hope I've tried to, give you a lot of background as to why you do want to try and control mosquitoes. So now we're at the juicy part, which is what can you do to try and reduce mosquitoes in where you live? So what I always like to do is start off with what doesn't work. And I know when I put the slide up, a lot of times people get offended by it. So I'm going to walk through every one of these and explain my reasoning behind why I have them up here. Um, so I, so first we're going to start with bug zappers. So bug zappers, yes, they use light to attract insects and then they're electrocuted. But mosquitoes aren't the only insects that are attracted to light, and multiple studies have found that the bulk of what's actually killed by these bug zappers are not going to be mosquitoes. It's actually going to be non-target insects. So that's why I don't recommend using bug zappers because you're actually going to be killing more beneficial insects than mosquitoes with them. Mosquito plants or any type of plants that are, say they have mosquito repelling properties, don't buy into it. Yes, those plants do contain mosquito repelling oils. However, the oils have to be extracted and concentrated a lot to have any type of repellency and actually be beneficial. And they have to actually be concentrated to a point that they can actually irritate your skin. So that's why I don't recommend the mosquito repelling plants. Um, there's there hasn't been any conclusive evidence that eating anything can repel mosquitoes. So, eating garlic, vitamin B, and bananas, no, that's not true. The repellent bracelets, they don't work. The ultrasonic devices and cell phone apps, they don't work. Let's talk about bats. With bats, I always I like to talk about with a bat how when they're flying, they're looking for something to eat. They are going, they're going to be they're they're going to target things that are going to be really the most valuable for them to eat. So if you compare the amount of calories they could get from a big fat juicy moth versus a rinky dinky mosquito, there's going to be so much more calories that are obtained through targeting, you know, larger prey items than mosquitoes. So that's really the bats themselves, they don't just eat mosquitoes. And it's actually better for them to eat larger prey items because they get more calories, more bang for their buck. Now, they're going to, as they're flying around, certainly, and they're, trying to find other prey items. If they happen to come upon mosquitoes, yes, they're going to eat them. Um, and if there's a, very large population explosion of mosquitoes, of course, they're going to eat them. But I just want people to be aware that that's not that's not all they're eating, and that's not their primary food item. And then I also like to point out that the Spartan, a mosquito eradicator, that also does not work. And I'm sure there's going to be questions about these things, and I'm happy to go into more details about things. But first, what I do want to talk about is what does work in terms of um, reducing the number of mosquitoes from around your home. And it sounds simple, but it's so important to practice source reduction. And so source reduction is just dumping out water-filled containers around your home once a week. It sounds too simple to be true, but I promise if you're going to do one thing to try and reduce mosquitoes, this is the one thing I recommend doing. So there's a lot of mosquitoes only need about a capful of water to be able to complete their immature development. So it's really important to just be aware of all the places they could potentially develop and where water can collect. And so this slide is illustrating some of those examples you might not always think about where, water could collect and mosquitoes could be developing. So I think flower pot saucers, that's an, a place where people don't always think that enough water can collect there for mosquito development to occur, but absolutely, I see it all the time. Buckets and containers, um, tarps, if you have water, that can pool within a tarp, absolutely, mosquitoes can develop there. Kids' toys being left out in the yard that get filled with water from rain or the sprinkler, mosquitoes will develop there. So, and clogged gutters. That's also a good reason to clean out your gutters, as mosquitoes can develop in clogged gutters. So, and then of course, it's always a good idea to dump out the water in your pet bowl once a week. If you're not doing it, you're likely doing it more than that. But if you're not, it's always good to do that because mosquitoes can develop there. So this is just trying to give you some ideas on where you want to check around your house to make sure there isn't mosquitoes developing there. And I also like to make sure I point out that if there are locations or water-filled containers that you can't dump out, there are ways to try and prevent mosquitoes from being produced in them as well. And so the options I like to present are either, using a stream from the water hose to flush out, for example, a bird bath or bromeliads. Mosquitoes really like bromeliads. They like to develop in bromeliads. But I don't feel like you have to, get rid of bromeliads. I think you can flush them out on a weekly basis or treat them once a month with products called mosquito bits or mosquito dunks. They contain BTI. It is a larvicide it's going to kill mosquito larvae. That's what larvicide means. And it is comes from bacteria in the soil. And the cool thing about it is not only is it natural, it is very, very specific in what it kills. It's only going to kill mosquitoes and gnats. It's not going to kill anything else. And it's for the aquatic stages of mosquitoes. So that's where this needs to be utilized to kill the immature mosquitoes because they have to feed on it for it to have any impact on them. So this is a great way to try and kill. If you, I always like to suggest trying to kill. First, get rid of any potential habitat where immature mosquitoes can develop, and then if not, then clean out that habitat with a water hose to get any mosquito larvae out, or if not, treat them as immatures with something like BTI, and so that you're killing them before they even become the adults that can fly around and bite us. That's really the best thing to do, is hopefully prevent them from developing or kill them as larvae before they become adults. But it's also a good idea, as I mentioned earlier, to just be aware that adult mosquitoes can transmit pathogens that cause mosquito-borne diseases, and you're going to want to protect yourself against that. And so the way to protect yourself is to wear long sleeve shirts and pants, and or you can do both, or one or the other. Use an EPA registered repellent. And the reason I stress using an EPA registered repellent, and you can use this search tool that I have an image picture of here to find EPA registered repellents. And the reason I stress utilizing them instead of something that just, claims to be natural, is because these products that have actually been tested to make sure that they're effective, which to me is really important when we're talking about prevention of mosquito-borne diseases. And they've been found to be safe. And so they're not going to cause irritation to your skin if you use them as directed. And so some of these, the EPA registered repellents are going to contain active ingredients such as DEET, picaridin IR 3535, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or 2-undecanone. So there are options if for some reason there is an active ingredient you want to avoid. There are some options. So did just want to show that here are some of the repellents that have been tested by faculty here at the Florida Medical Entomology Laboratory. And these are some of the repellents that prevented mosquitoes from biting or landing on a person. And they had that for the longest amount of time. So here are some of the product names. So Off Deep Woods, it was prevented mosquitoes from landing for 5 hours. Also Off Skintastic, Bite Blocker. And if most of these do contain DEET, but if you want an option that does not contain DEET, here's Repel Lemon Eucalyptus Insect Repellent, and that contains oil of lemon eucalyptus. So there are options for different types of repellents that are recommended by the CDC and registered with the EPA. I also want to recommend making sure that adult mosquitoes can't get into your house. So check first holes in your screens and on your doors. Mosquitoes aren't that strong of flyers. So if you're sitting on a back porch and you can just aim a fan straight at you, then that's going to keep them from being able to land on you. So these are just some options to consider using to try and prevent mosquitoes from biting you. Also, spatial repellents, such as the ones pictured here made by Thermacell, they are helpful. They do work. They can repel mosquitoes. One thing to know is they do, if it's windy, these aren't going to be that effective because they're not going to keep like a protective bubble around you. So, think of the circumstance. If it's not a windy day, then this would be a great option. If you're just kind of like hanging on the porch also, this would be a great thing to consider to repel the mosquitoes. And I also just always like to recommend contacting your local mosquito control program. For those of you in Broward County, and actually for most of you wherever you are, I probably work with your mosquito control program, and so I know they do a great job. They will, if you call them, they will come out and investigate your mosquito problems, and they will help you identify maybe where the mosquitoes are coming from. So I always and they may provide you with free mosquito fish to put in like a rain barrel or maybe a small pond you might have. So they can actually be very helpful. Um, I always like to encourage working with your mosquito control program rather than working against them. Um, they are really doing their best to try and reduce mosquitoes and have as little non-target impacts as possible. So I want to make sure I leave a lot of time for questions because I know there's always questions. So I just wanted to make you aware that if you go to Ask IFAS or yeah, what I'm used to calling EDIS, but is now called Ask IFAS. There's lots of publications about mosquitoes. You can find more information about the repellents, mosquitoes and bromeliads. There's an entire document on mosquitoes and bromeliads. If that's a topic you're interested in, you want to get more information on, definitely Google Ask IFAS. And then once you get to the website, type in mosquitoes, and you're going to have lots of options available. And then we also have some products available through the Extension bookstore. And I am always a resource for you. You're always welcome to call me or email me if you have any questions. I'm certainly happy to answer ones now, and of course, any ones that come in the future.